Hello, I'm Kenny Anderson, Director of Multicultural Affairs for the City of Huntsville. And as always, it's my pleasure to be able to share information with you about great things that are happening in the city. And of course, today will be no different. Joining me today is Dr. Casey Wardynski, the superintendent of the Huntsville City School Systems. How are you doing today?
Good, good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. You know, this is always, for me, a great opportunity to really talk about what's happening in our community as far as education is concerned, because I still believe that education is at the core of people's success in life.
Sure.
And one of the things that impresses me about what's happening across the city is that there are a lot of new developments taking place. With new developments taking place, there are lots of questions.
Sure.
So I think I've got the right guest today to answer some of those questions.
Sure.
First of all, talk a little bit about, I know there's a lot of new construction being anticipated as far as schools are concerned. Talk a little bit about what's happening on that forefront and how are things coming along?
Sure. Well, we're in the midst of probably the most comprehensive plan in 43 years regarding facilities and enrollments. The city, working with the school system, has plans to develop 2 new high schools and to repurpose 2 older high schools. So Grissom in the south, we're building at the end of Weatherly Road. That'll be a very nice new facility on 55 acres. And the old facility will be repurposed into a community access theater, gymnasium. I think the police precinct's going into the iPod that we built there, and then perhaps a library. And in the north, another new high school coming online, Jemison. That's on a 55-acre facility as well on Pulaski Pike. The old Johnson High School will be repurposed, I believe, for a training facility for fire and police and perhaps reserve military components. So those are the sort of keystones of the effort. And in between, we've got a new pre-K to 8th grade school going in at Whitesburg, a new elementary school going in called Hereford. That'll replace University Place. That'll be built at Terry Heights. We've also got nearing completion, be completed this August, is the 9th grade academy at Huntsville High School. And then down the road, we've got Martin Luther King replacement and the new McNair Junior High School coming online as well in the north. So quite a bit going on.
It is. What does that mean for students?
Well, every student in Huntsville City, probably unique in our state, will go to a new high school, all designed for 21st century education. In terms of our student safety, today we've got 2% in schools with tornado shelters. By the end of this construction program, it'll be 27%. Probably the high in the state as well. So Huntsville, as it leads in many areas, will be leading in school design, school safety, modern school facilities, all sorts of firsts for our city and, of course, benchmarks for the state.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about children first all the time,
right,
because they are at the core of all that we do. Sure. Speaking of core, of course, we've got a lot of chatter about the core standards and people who are either for or against that. I've heard a lot of conversation about that. Sometimes I kind of wonder what people are hearing and what they're listening to. If you could just maybe give us a short summary of what those core standards mean for us as a school system, would you do that for us?
Well, they're vital. You know, Alabama came in not 49th, but 50th this year in terms of math proficiency when evaluated against the other states. When we look at the United States versus other countries, we have states in the United States are doing terrifically well, Massachusetts, Vermont, and so forth. Alabama needs to be one of those. And high standards drove those states. High standards can drive our state too. And these standards are standards in that they prescribe what a student ought to know as a minimum when they complete a grade. It's not a ceiling, it's a floor. I know some folks talk as if these are ceilings. Of course there's no ceilings in education. There's base levels because our grades layer each on the other. So Algebra 2. How do we prepare a child to succeed in Algebra 2 if we haven't completed Algebra 1 to standard? And we know what Algebra 1 requires for children to be college ready. It's the same stuff that's tested on the ACT. So if we're not teaching to standard, how are our kids going to do well on things like ACT? How are they going to get scholarships? The whole thing needs to hang together. And when one tries to pull out standards, you're really pulling out the rug underneath education. And these standards are common, meaning they're shared across many domains and many states. That's a good news story too, because folks that come to Alabama come from all over, and they're going to compete with kids from all over, including other countries. And so we need high standards, standards that aren't just sort of unique to a state that has not done terrifically well in education, but perhaps aligned with states that have done very, very well, and that are aligned with things we know will make our kids ready for college and ready for competition with folks that are working around the world.
I mean, there's some resistance to this whole concept. Again, do you think, as an administrator and an educator, do you see the resistance as being more people's natural response to change, or not really understanding what this all means for our school system? Because it seems to me in many ways that if you look at what the Common Core presents,
Right.
it makes a whole lot of sense.
Right.
If you're thinking about education across the board and you're thinking about the ultimate goal, that's to elevate our children to the point that they can succeed.
Right.
What do you think the source of that resistance is?
I think some people have some notion that this is coming to us from the federal government. I spent from age 17 to age 54 working for the federal government. I was in the military. I know about those folks. Not every idea that comes out of Washington from any administration is a good idea, but these ideas didn't come out of Washington. They came out of higher ed and business, and they're good ideas. Now, the federal government may like them too, but that doesn't make them bad just because they like them. So I think that's a chunk of it, is some resistance to federal overreach. And of course, this began under the Bush administration, so this isn't a Republican, Democrat, Tea Party, whatever kind of issue. This has spanned different administrations, and it's really an immutable. We need to educate our children to compete, and that means there's things they need to know. When we look at the Common Core standards, in Alabama we call them college and career ready standards, and we look what was going on in our classrooms, we're now administering assessments that are aligned with those standards, and we also allow teachers to administer the same assessments they've been giving these many years. And they're poorly aligned. The teacher tests in Algebra 2, many of them we found were teaching Algebra 1 standards. And when you look at things like ACT Quality Core outcomes, it's clear what was going on. Our kids fade as you get deeper into the standards, into the more rigorous areas of those assessments. Well, they've never seen it, because if we're reteaching Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, we're not going to complete Algebra 2. Kids aren't going to be set up for success in subsequent math curriculum, calculus, trigonometry, and so forth, and it just builds a problem. And then they get to college, and they need to remediate. And that's a waste of mom and dad's money. It leaves our kids poorly positioned to succeed. And so standards are the right thing to do. I mentioned I was in the military for a long time. When we went from the post-Vietnam era Army to the one that can do anything, it was about standards for that bunch too. And it was very high standards of ability to execute things in the military domain. Those same standards you'd find in any business setting. You're going to be an accountant, there's standards. You have to be able to pass the assessments to be a CPA. When you're a CPA, you're going to have to develop documents and reports that comply with the FASB and GASB standards. I don't know a business that doesn't have a standard.
And it's all about efficiency as well. So,
Sure.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I got really excited about was when I started hearing about these ninth grade academies.
Right.
And I thought, well, what a wonderful conceptual idea for young people making the transition from middle school to high school and beyond. Right. Talk about why that's important for the city school system.
Sure. Culture is really important, especially in schools. So as those folks come in for middle years programs, 8th grade into 9th grade, we want to give a very sort of protected and structured environment for them. So they have more freedom in high school, of course, than you'd have in the middle years. And as they gain that freedom, we need to make sure that they're grounded within good study habits, the culture of the school, our culture, not some fringe group that wants to recreate the school in some other sort of image with less discipline and less expectations about learning. And so we want them to be in that environment. They see the same teachers, they're in the same part of the building, same administrator, and then once they sort of made it out of that, they're prepared to be a sophomore, junior, and senior and succeed, and we're seeing much improved discipline. We see improved academic results from that. The last schools that we're going to add that program to is actually, the last school is Huntsville High. When its 9th grade academy opens, it'll be our last high school to have a 9th grade academy. We added one this year at Johnson, and then that'll complete the set. And we're very pleased how they're operating. We've even sort of begun doing that in 6th grade now, sort of a 6th grade academy for our junior high kids, because it is a big transition from the culture of an elementary school to a middle school and then from middle to high. We try to ease those transitions, And these academies go a long way to doing that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see over the course of time just what kind of success you have, but I imagine you're going to have some great success. You know, we hear a lot of talk today about failing schools and some schools that have been identified in Huntsville as failing schools. I know some of the story behind that perception is everything, and when you use terms and you think about things conceptually, sometimes you think about it in very negative ways. I've been impressed as I've gone around to some of these schools and heard about the great things that are happening in these schools. And I know that you've made a commitment to a lot of improvement, whether it's Teach for America teachers, social workers in schools, and a variety of other things. Sure. Talk about some of the things that are happening in some of these schools that people may not know about.
Well, the AAA law, the Alabama Accountability Act, was designed to do two things. It was sort of slipped in to provide the flexibility superintendents have been looking for many, many years. And I think Huntsville leads the way in flexibility requests. We've got 6 already in the mill. I think 3 or 4 have already been approved. We've got a major one out there regarding funding, per pupil funding, changing the focus of funding from aligning it with adults to aligning it with children so the money follows the kids and their needs. And on the other side, that was accountability, which sounds great, but they used data that was 6 years old. And so they had a look-back period of 6 years, and if in those 6 years a school had data that put it in the bottom 6% of our state over any 3-year period, it got the designation of a failing school. So we have a school like Martin Luther King, which is this year the Council for Leadership in Alabama School, banner school. Out of the 1,000+ schools in our state, 100-odd were recommended to be a class school, and I believe 10 were selected. Martin Luther King's one of them. Their data, their recent data, we've got a new leader there since I've been around. That leader's done a great job in that school. We've got new teachers in that school, and they've done a great job of developing a whole new set of data that looks really good. And yet they're labeled a failing school, and it'll take X number of years to work that off. They're a banner school, which means they're a model for other schools to emulate. Kind of a little odd.
Yeah.
You know, we've got other schools that are doing well. Lakewood, doing very well. Dawson's making great headway. It was on the list because it received a school improvement grant from the federal government that also qualified it to be on the list. So by virtue of having received some federal money plus up, it became eligible to be on that list. Not exactly what we would intend. Then we've got Johnson High School in the north. I believe that school we've got more than half new faculty, all new leadership. We're seeing dramatic improvements in student achievement. You know, the graduation rate's now up above the state goal. It went in 2 years from being about, I think it was 64% to now we're at 78%. So we're making big moves across the board. Butler was down around 31, now it's up about 45 and continues to move forward. And we weren't waiting for anybody to name our schools. Those programs and those changes all went into effect in 2011, 2012, well ahead of this law. And what this law really does is act as a bit of a lodestone on our schools. And I don't think it's particularly helpful for the kids or the faculty. You know, we don't need prodding. We're already well ahead of the curve in terms of bringing resources to bear, putting changes in effect, having the right teachers in the schools. You know, in our schools, for the last 3 years, every student in grade 3 and above completes a survey on every teacher in every course. And we find that information invaluable to helping guide teacher development and identifying effective teaching. And we lead the school. I mean, we lead the state and schools in that domain in terms of identifying effective teachers. State comes up here to look at what we're doing, and yet we've got, you know, the most failing schools. It's kind of a paradox.
It is. And as Paul Harvey would say, that's the rest of the story.
That's right.
And that's the part of the story that we really want people to know. We've got maybe 30 seconds left in the broadcast, but in this portion of the broadcast, but if you could just quickly talk about any success in education is a combination of what happens at the administrative level, the staff level, faculty level, parents, community, students. How can people become more engaged in the process of proactive school engagement?
Sure, there's any number of ways. Perhaps the easiest way, if you don't have children already in our schools, if you go to our website, right on the front page is a thing called the virtual volunteer website. And you can volunteer time, you can support a sport, a classroom. We have teachers asking for materials and tutors and so forth. And so you can log in there and become a virtual volunteer, and the service matches you with needs and your interests. So that's very nice. That you can put down your school area of interest, all the way out to working with one of our teams if you want to do sports, and we have a lot of those, to working with the arts. So there's a whole range of things folks can do.
Lots of opportunities.
That's right.
In a great school system. Dr. Casey Wardynski, thank you for being with us
Sure.
today on the broadcast.
Thanks, Kenny.